The dialogue on our issue has become so convoluted, so distorted, so filled with misinformation, it'd make a thin man fat. Hey, when I started in this industry, I was 165 pounds. That's all I'm saying. We do still have bipartisan support for our fuel, we do. But there's also a lot of frustration with the food versus fuel debate. And it has undermined support for ethanol in Washington, D.C. Let me tell you something. There is no food versus fuel debate. We produce both food and fuel. At this plant, you're going to produce 54 million gallons of ethanol. That's great. You're also going to be producing a lot of distillers' feed that is then used. We only use the starch in the corn. I'm sort of a testament to the fact that there's too much starch in our diet, right? What we leave behind is a very high-value, high-protein feed grain that is then fed to cattle, to dairy, to poultry all across this country. In fact, the amount of DDG that's produced by the U.S. ethanol industry is the equivalent of the amount of feed that is used to feed cattle in feedlots all across the country, period. There is no food versus fuel debate. People want to say that our industry is driving up the price of food. That's horse hockey. Now, a 1 pound pork chop costs about $3.60. In that pork chop is 30 cents worth of corn. We're not driving up the price of pork. No siree. What is? What's driving up commodity prices everywhere? The price of oil. You know, it takes so much petroleum to grow crops, to transport the crop to a feedlot or a storage bin or an ethanol plant. It takes energy to produce the food. It takes energy to wrap the food. It takes energy to transport the food to the marketplace. It takes energy to freeze that fuel. The amount of petroleum in that pork chop is a heck of a lot more than the amount of corn. There will never be food security in this country or this world unless and until we've got energy security. We've got to get our arms around the price of oil. And the only thing that we have to do that with is ethanol. The ethanol that was produced in this country last year helped us reduce the need for some 460 million barrels of oil. That ain't chump change. But we need to make sure that folks in Washington are hearing the message. Now look, there's a guy down the road that has a gavel in his hand that has a fair amount to say about what happens in Washington, D.C. on energy and economic issues. You need to remind the speaker why ethanol is so important. You need to remind him what it does to the local economy in Lima and across the county and the state and the country. You got to tell him that it is not ethanol driving up the price of food. Let's have an adult conversation about this. There was a hearing yesterday in the House Ag Committee. Let's see, they invited the cattle guys. They invited the pork guys. They invited some academic that had been paid for by the cattle guys. There wasn't anybody there from the ethanol industry. There wasn't anybody there from the Department of Agriculture. There wasn't anybody there that could have provided some sense of balance and told the members of Congress at that hearing that, the 3% of ethanol, 3% of the world's grain supply that is used in the production of ethanol is not driving world grain prices. Let's step back. Let's take a look at the role of speculators in these markets. Let's evaluate dispassionately the role of other demand factors. And let's recognize that were it not for the demand for grain for ethanol in this country, that Monsanto and DuPont may not have made the investments that are allowing us to improve our yields, even in a horrible weather year like this has been. There's a reason why this industry is important, and these folks need to be reminded of it each and every day. I can do it from Washington, D.C., and I will continue to do so, and I will proudly do it. But I can't hold a candle to what you're able to do. You need to get a hold of your members of Congress. your senators, the speaker, and you need to remind him how important this is. We need to be successful here because the winds in Washington right now are very challenging. People want to scale back the renewable fuel standard, the thing that's going to allow this industry to continue to grow and evolve. And there will be continued attacks until big oil and big food get their way, and our industry is forced to slow down or, God forbid, shut down. We can't let that happen. But there are very well-heeled, well-financed, highly motivated constituencies in Washington, D.C. that don't like the fact that farmers in Ohio are taking a part of their barrel of oil, that don't like the fact that the days of $2 corn are gone. Guess what? $2 corn is no more sustainable than $10 corn. We have to have a balance. Ethanol has provided that balance. Ethanol has allowed investment in rural communities like you see with this plant here. Ethanol has allowed us to reduce our dependence on imported oil like nothing else. Ethanol, as I indicated, has allowed us to reduce emissions in the nation's cities. It's doing everything that you told members of Congress years ago it would do, and now we're being penalized for our success. Well, that's ridiculous. We need more investment in this industry. We need to continue to grow and evolve this industry. And it's important for the reasons I cited, but this one in particular. Because ultimately, ethanol is critical to our national security. Look, last Sunday, we recognized the 10-year anniversary of 9/11. And that was a sad day for a lot of us, particularly those of us who live and work in Washington, D.C., and saw friends of ours die in that horrible day. I had a good friend working at the Pentagon, Angela House. She was in the third ring of the Pentagon. When the jet entered, she was amassed around a conference table talking with folks in the Navy about what resources they could bring to bear in New York City, and she died in an instant. There isn't anybody in Washington, D.C. that doesn't know people that died that day. But what I like to focus on are the heroes, the people on Flight 93, the first responders in New York and in Washington. But there are other heroes that aren't so much talked about. You know, it was absolutely 9/11 and the recognition that the people that committed that heinous act were from a part of the world that we had grown way too dependent upon for our energy supplies. And 9/11 triggered a response in D.C. that led to the Energy Policy Act of 2005 and the Renewable Fuels Standard that set us on the course that we're on today. You're part of that. You are part of the investment to make this industry, or make this nation, more energy secure. I want to thank you for that. I want you to remind people of that. You're the guardians of our energy future. You're the guardians of our economic prosperity. You're the guardians of our future. Your plant is aptly named, and I want to thank you. Congratulations.